good evening. Or is it? It's kind of late afternoon, so we'll say. It's getting a little hard to adjust to the everything getting darker earlier. So, I just want to say thank you for coming. I know you received a postcard just like this, and a lot of people think about doing things like this, but this is the Courageous Crew. Thank you for being and spending time coming out and being here to gather information. So I'm just going to quick introduce a few of our staff that are here tonight. So Lara, who's standing in the back, if you want to just wave. She is our pre-planning specialist and my wife, so we'll be hearing from her a little bit later. And we have a couple of our staff members, Jackie and Lucy, and they'll be helping serve. We're going to have a little meal afterwards, and so they'll be helping serve. And you probably saw Shar as you walked in the door. So I just want to actually keep this interactive a little bit tonight too. So if you feel free, if you want to get a beverage, feel free to go ahead and help yourself. It is free refills all night. So. Myself, my name is Mike Shea. I'm one of the funeral directors here at Cook Funeral Home. I've been a funeral director for about 28 years. And so I grew up in a family that owned a funeral home in west central Minnesota, so I'm a fourth generation. And so privileged to be able to carry on the tradition of great-grandpa, grandpa, dad, and myself in the funeral profession. So I actually grew up in a small town called Glenwood. And so actually Laura and I both went to high school there. And it's the land of ice fishing and Ole and Lena, and that's about it. So, but I don't know if you know Ole and Lena. They've had a few dysfunctional years in their marriage, but Ole and Lena, they're a Norwegian couple, don't you know? Well, Ole, I don't know if you heard that Ole died. Just out of the blue, he just died. And so Lena went over to the newspaper office one day, and she was going to put a little notice in the paper, and she said, I just want to put in there that Ole died. That's it, just nothing else. And the lady behind the desk said, well, Lena, don't you know that if you want to put in a little bit more, it's the first 5 words are free. And she goes, oh, goodness gracious. Well, I know. How about we put in Ole died, boat for sale. So anyway, so again, have the privilege to be able to serve the Cottage Grove and St. Paul Park areas for going on 11 years now, and so we really have the privilege of meeting a lot of really great folks here. So this is home. So we serve families here in Cottage Grove as well as our St. Paul Park location. That was our primary location, not where our current location was built in 1965. Prior to that, we were located close to where Supermoms was. And that was a converted home, and we operated as a funeral home there. Just one of the few south of the 494, which wasn't there at the time, but 494 area, to serve St. Paul Park, Newport, and then branched into Cottage Grove, which Cottage Grove was a suburb of St. Paul Park. I don't know if you knew that or not, but anyway, we're just a few pictures of our building. In 2015, we added this space here that we're sitting in. This was a portion of our chapel. We added on a little bit more towards 80th Street. We added on a lunchroom as well, so we have the ability to serve meals and everything here. So really a great space to work, and have had a lot of great feedback from families that we've been able to serve. So if we've had the privilege of serving your family, I just want to say thank you for trusting us and just allowing you to serve you and your family during those times. And so we've counted a privilege to be able to serve families in the area, and we believe in really treating people like family, but actually better than family, because sometimes families, how they treat each other. So, but this is our crew. The rest of our crew, we have 4 funeral directors here, and we serve families at need, as well as pre-planning, setting up things in advance, and then also with aftercare. So Donna, who is just in that front, I'm surrounded by all ladies here, but just to the right side or left side of me, she is our aftercare person. So she what her role is she reaches out to families and follows up with them. So we believe in journeying with them for that first year. And she also facilitates a grief group, and she herself has had some situations where she's lost 2 children, and so she really has this ability to connect with people. So we really have a great staff, and we're thankful to be here. So I'm a map person, so I really believe in trying to know where I'm heading before I set out on my journey. And so we've got a lot of great information here tonight. So we're going to establish the why. Why are we here? We want to talk about something called the Final Wishes Organizer. We'll also talk a little bit about common reasons why people plan ahead, something called the acute loss period, and then also key points of a funeral plan as well as customizing that plan for yourself. But before we get into a lot of that information, we're going to do some exercise. But you don't have to stand up or anything. We're going to do a little trivia. We're going to see who the smartest people in the room are, or the quickest. And so I'm going to have Lucy come up. And the way this is going to work is I'm going to put a question on the board, and the first person that raises their hand with the correct answer gets to choose one of these fine treats from Vanna. So, all right, first question. The Atkinson Cemetery. Does anybody know where the Atkinson Cemetery is in Cottage Grove? Okay. There's not very many cemeteries in Cottage Grove, but if you're familiar with where McDonald's is, and then also where the tire place is. So that is called the Atkinson Cemetery. So there is, now when you drive by that, you're going to think about this every time. So it is affiliated with a national company. So which company is it? Is it, oops. Mars, who said it? Oh, did you know that in advance?
Yeah.
Oh. Yes, it is Mars.
I actually work there.
Okay. So the Mars company, the Mars Candy Company, originated in this area. And so someone that married into the family is buried there. And so their family, or the family company, maintains that cemetery. They have a perpetual care fund that maintains that cemetery. So great job, Pat. All right. Has anybody heard of Aretha Franklin? Aretha? Okay. So she passed away 2018, and I'm going to put 4 statements on the board, and we need to pick out which one is the false statement, okay? The incorrect one. Okay, did she have only 50 pink Cadillacs parked outside the church during her funeral? Did she have her legs crossed in the casket? Was her casket 24 karat gold plated? And did she have 4 outfit changes over the course of the visitation and funeral? Anybody have any guesses? You get 4 options. Yes. She did have a 24 karat gold casket. Yes.
Crossed her legs?
That is true. That is a true statement also. Yeah.
That's got to be the outfits.
You got to raise your hand though to win.
4 outfits.
That is a correct statement. That's a true statement also. So you only have. Did you want to? You had your hand up. Did you want to try for that?
Well, I was doing that one too, but how about the pink cap?
Yeah.
That is the correct answer. So she is the winner. So there was actually 100 pink Cadillacs. There was her in her casket with her legs crossed, as well as the 24 karat gold casket. So we don't have a 24 karat gold casket on hand, but if you want, we can certainly get a hold of one. So.
Did she contract Mary Kay?
Yeah.
Probably. Do we have any veterans in the crowd? Okay. What branch did you say? Air Force. Okay. Army? Air Force. Anybody else? Well, thank you for your service. I thought we'd have a Marine here, but because we had every branch represented in our first session except for Marines. So just think about the folded flag. Okay. So during a veteran service, either the flag can be draped over a casket or it would be folded, placed next to an urn. Think about that folded flag. How many times would that folded flag need to be folded before it is a correct fold? Is it 7, 10, 13, or 17? Yeah. That is incorrect. It's a good try, though. Yeah.
17?
That is a good try, but that's incorrect also.
It's gotta be sub 13.
That's not correct either. Daryl. What? Did you say 13? Okay. 13, yes, it was. All right. All right, great job. So 13, significant number. Now, I would have to say this is a properly folded flag. Not all flags get folded as properly as they should. So that's my disclaimer. So that's the last question, so thank you. I'm sorry, there is one more question. Being that it's, we've got the royalty, so who holds the record for the world's most expensive funeral? Is it Michael Jackson, Elvis Presley, Princess Di, or JFK? Which one? Princess Di, that is correct. Good job. Do you know how costly her funeral was? Okay, $16.2 million. Yeah. Yep. And I'm having a feeling that we might have a more expensive one that's going on right now. So.
Yeah, oh yeah.
All right, thank you. So speaking of the royal family, September 8th, the Queen died, and her kingdom is now in a 10-day period of national mourning. And so this is just a picture of her coffin being carried into, I believe it's St. Giles Cathedral in Scotland. And this was just a couple days ago. So yesterday, her coffin was flown to Buckingham Palace. She was placed into the casket, and then she will be lying in state at the Houses of Parliament for the next 4 days for the nation to pay their respects. So, interesting, her coffin was actually built about 32 years ago, and it's built out of something called English oak. Currently, it's a very rare wood. Currently, a lot of their English coffins are built out of American oak. Interesting. So it is lined with lead, which will allow her to be preserved a lot longer because she's going to be buried in an above ground family crypt. And it matches the same exact one that her husband was buried in last year. So very interesting. There's a lot of symbolism that goes along with the royalty. And different between coffins and caskets. Caskets would be what we would typically see, a 4-sided rectangle casket. A coffin is a 6-sided. It's got angles on it. It's called anthropoid shape, and it's got 6 or 8 sides. And generally, up to the 16th and 17th century, it was mostly reserved for those who were wealthy. And those who were not wealthy were shrouded and they were buried. So interesting fact as we get into her funeral. It's on Monday. We're not involved in the funeral, but it definitely would be on TV. All right. So I always like to start off by asking, what is the most important reason you're here today? If you want to, you can. This is just for you. You can write that down on a piece of paper. What is the most important reason you're here today? It might be just to gather information. It might be to continue to explore more. It might be you're getting information for someone else or someone in your family. Regardless, I just want, as you walk away from this seminar today, is just to have a lot of information that will help you in the process. Has anyone ever planned a funeral before? Okay, quite a few. Was it planned in advance? Okay. So I have 2 experiences. One, both of my grandparents, both sides of my grandparents were pre-planned. It was planned in advance, and we were able to find a lot of peace in just following through the details and just carrying out their wishes. It was a good framework for us. We were able to do some personal things with that, but we were just able to follow through. There wasn't really any question because Grandma spelled it out for us. So, Conversely, I've also had the unexpected death of my father-in-law. He was a farmer. He was in his early 50s. And so, he was kind of larger than life. He was just farming and milking cows and got sick, and within 10 days he had died. And so we look back on that and we're like, we are in the funeral profession. We were so busy with his care and wanting to take care of him. We never had the conversation with him because we never went there in our minds that, well, we'll probably be planning his funeral. We never thought that. So we never went there. So two really different experiences. And so that kind of stems our passion to be able to educate people and say, just have these conversations. And it's interesting because I know we would sit at the table and we would have cake all day long because that's what farmers do. At 3 o'clock there's breakfast, lunch, cake, second cake, and then there's dinner. So we had these conversations, but we never really got into things that I should have known about. So immediately following a death, people don't realize that there's many things, many decisions that have to be made. The first question is if the death occurs in a facility, the facility will ask, well, which funeral home would you like to work with? We've had many incidences where families have been making phone calls. That's their first thought of, I need to make some phone calls. I need to schedule with a funeral home. I don't even know what I never had any direction on what I should do. So that's, and we get many phone calls where people say, I don't know where to start. And so that's kind of our ground zero. And then oftentimes a funeral home will call the family back and will say, what are your thoughts? What would you like to see happen? What type of service would you like to have? And then they're faced with several other questions after that. And then, of course, they get phone calls from family, or they get questions. What your family is asking, when is the service? And what's the next steps? So many times people don't realize that there's so many decisions. There's up to 125 decisions within about 36 hours. And most of the time, a death does not occur at 2 in the afternoon, and everybody's had a great night of sleep. It's mostly people have had long days, months, weeks leading up to this moment, and to be brought in here and sit down at our conference table and have a conversation, that's a lot for them to absorb. And so, for this reason, we've put together something called Final Wishes Organizer. That's this pamphlet here. And the Final Wishes Organizer it's a roadmap, and it's a toolkit. It's your voice in the room for your family after our death has taken place. Now, I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I think I'm the favorite, but I don't know that. I have no measurement, but my siblings and I get along great. We love hanging out. We love doing stuff together. But when you get us together to figure out what kind of pizza we're going to order or what movie we're going to pick out, that's almost impossible because we have 5 different ideas of what's going to happen, what's the best thing to do. So can you imagine now, take those 5 different walks of life, 5 different personalities, but still enjoy getting along? Are we going to get 100% right on all of those decisions in a short time? I think we'll probably wonder, did we get it right? Did we do too much? Did we do too little? If Mom and Dad would have just had some type of roadmap for us, it would have been a gift. And so that's one of the things that Laura does, is she specializes in just sitting down with folks and getting their information put together, talking through what wishes are. Because we used to actually give this out to families, and we found that it created a little bit more confusion because it only got half done. And you don't know what you don't know until you sit down with someone that has some information to walk you through. So really the best way to get that organizer is to sit down with Laura, have her walk through all the details, and then what we do is we save that information in our file and we put it away. It's immediately accessible. And then when you have changes in it, you're always welcome to come and we can always update that. So, how did that slide get in there? So, we just became grandparents on Thursday. So, speaking of updating your files, I just told him the Oli and Lena joke, so this was, anyway, I know you were expecting that, but So anyway, you can update your information as it changes. So why would people plan ahead? So there are several reasons. And just because we talk about it doesn't mean it speeds the process up. So just to kind of relieve some pressure there. Found that a guy that knew about preparation was Abraham Lincoln, and he was quoted as saying, "You give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'm going to spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe." So he knew the value of preparation. That takes the heavy lifting out of your job. So 4 solid reasons of why funeral planning gives you the chance to make your wishes known. Burial, cremation. In fact, when we talk about cremation, it actually brings up another 4 or 5 questions that I have, because sometimes somebody who just wants to be cremated, but they also want to have some type of service, or maybe they want to have some type of viewing and then cremation afterwards. So it actually, when somebody just says, "I want to be cremated," then that opens up a larger conversation. Because we know that when a spouse dies, the surviving spouse is the one that can authorize. They're in charge of all the funeral making decisions. They can divide that out to children if there are some children, but legally the spouse is in charge. So if the second spouse dies and there's just children that are surviving, then each one of those 4 children are responsible for making the decision. So we need to get their signatures for cremation to take place. So there's a lot of layers that go into it. And so why, I always say, why leave it open-ended? Many examples that I've had, but one specific example is I had a gentleman who passed away. His wife had passed away prior to, but he was survived by his siblings. There was no children from the marriage. He was survived by his siblings. Well, the conversation never came up, and they had no idea what he wanted to do. And so what they decided was, we're going to have his body prepared, traditional service with a casket and burial. Well, a couple days, and they were not sure about that. They were just kind of guessing. Well, a couple days later, we met and we made all the plans. A couple days later, they were cleaning out his closet, and they found that there was an urn in there that he had purchased several years ago. Well, now, because they just didn't know. So anyway, it took a lot of guessing, but I think they kind of made it a little compromise on what they decided to do, is he was going to be cremated after that. So it was just stress for them, and if it just would have been very clear, it would have been really helpful. In fact, if you're a part of a second marriage with kids from the first marriage, then the spouse, the current spouse, is in charge of making arrangements. So having your voice in the room is vital. So peace of mind. Full disclosure here, how many people have been thinking about planning their funeral for at least 3 years? Okay, all right, good. How about 5 years? Okay, all right, how about 10? Where it's a safe space here? Okay, so, well, I've got good news. You don't have to wait any longer. So, and just encourage you to be able to take this opportunity. In fact, it's about really 90 minutes of just uncomfortable, and then you just put it in the drawer and you live your life. And actually, I'm adding something to my pre-plan. It's going to be, I'm a Vikings fan, but I'm a realist when it comes to being a Vikings fan. I'm going to hire 6 Minnesota Vikings pallbearers so they can let me down one more time. So anyway. Another reason is that it allows the family for a positive entry into grief. So family can be together, and they can not have to really focus on the businessy decision types of things. And I've also seen the opposite is true. I've also seen where decisions weren't made, they weren't communicated, and all of a sudden one part of the family is wanting to do this, the other family is wanting to do this, and it splits the family. So I've seen that happen too, and I never want to see families split over decisions that could have been made in advance. So, and the last reason is once you go through the planning process, you can always have some of those costs addressed because you'll kind of know what to budget. Everybody wants to know how, if you're going to plan a house project or something, you want to know what your budget is that you're working with. So that's always an important piece too. I'm going to shift gears really quick because I came across something that we focus so much on when a person dies. Are they going to be buried? Are they going to be cremated? But that's only how we treat and care for the body. So there's just something deeper sometimes that we need to take into consideration. And there's something that, I mentioned this earlier, it's called the acute loss period. But it's the time when a life-changing event happens, and that period of time, and then the onset of grief. So I don't know if anybody here had visited New York City prior to 9/11. But if you had, this is what you'd see. You'd see Statue of Liberty in the harbor. You'd see your symbols of commerce, the Twin Towers in the background. But then in the morning, it all changed. Everything changed. I mean, we just reflected on that, and 21 years ago that it happened. And sometimes it just feels like, it hasn't been that long. So, but in a moment, it changed. And so I think we can all remember when we first heard that. We can remember maybe where we were or what we were doing, but I think we can remember where we were when we heard that news. And it was an immediate impact. And once you hear something, and this was a president, he was just going about his everyday business, reading a book to some kids, and that's what his reaction was. When you hear it, you immediately want to bring people into the story. You want to start sharing it. Because once I heard it, I got the phone call from my wife, and I was at work, and I had to get into the story. So the next thing we did was we started pulling out the TV, or this was mostly pre-internet. So I pulled out a TV and I was watching it. I was just glued to it, and it wasn't something that we watched just one time. We just watched it over and over, and just in the disbelief, wow, this is really happening. When we had to kind of make sense of this tragedy, so we gathered. We felt safe in gathering. There's something about gathering together that when you look to people for comfort, you look to people for prayer and support. But there's something powerful about gathering. And then in the gathering, there's connections that are made. You start processing the things that this common experience you're going through. There's a support network that's formed. We started realizing we really do value patriotism and what it means to really be an American. And there's something powerful in making those connections. And then we reflected. We reflected on what was lost, and we tried to figure it out. And what does this all mean, and how will this impact us? And if it isn't something that touched us personally, it's still, if we didn't know somebody that had died in that, it still impacted us in a personal way. So once through a little bit of process, we were able to start celebrating what matters most, and the bravery of people and the courage, and that this wouldn't define us as a nation. We began to rise from the shock of that moment. It would mark us, and it would change us, but we would heal, and we'd be resilient, and we would be unified. And so what this experience has shown is that research has said that it related so much to the individual experiences that families have after a death, is that one day all of our families will be faced with their own unique loss experience. Maybe not to the extent that 9/11 shook us, but at some point it will impact us. We'll all go through it, and we're thrust into it. It's called the acute loss period. And the acute loss period, there is a little handout on your table where you can see it a little bit more clearly. But it describes the steps that a family goes through. This is really the window of time that we're working with families. And you can start to see how hearing and sharing, seeing, gathering, connecting, and reflecting, celebrating, how that all really fits into the things that happen after the death occurs. Because I think we can all think of when we heard of a loved one's passing, how that impacted us. Sometimes it hits us really deep, and then immediately we need to share that. We need to get other people in our story. We want to get in their story, and we're compelled to reach out. I believe we were created to do life together, and so in us. We feel that connection is made. So making the connection with our loved one that has died, or seeing our family that's greatly impacted, that's where the seeing, and then you start gathering. When people say, "When is the funeral?" What they're really saying to you, that's the code for, I want to support you in any way I can, and when can I start doing that? So that's a really key moment where that's code for, I want to be in the middle of your circle of your grief that you're going through. On average, it's interesting, on average, 40% of the people that go to funerals never knew the deceased. They had a connection with someone that was part of the family, or someone that they had some indirect connection with. So 40%, which is really interesting, are going there to support the people that are there. So is the funeral for the deceased? Yes. The funeral really, really impacts the living. So, and so in those connections, we're strengthened. We find that. And then in reflecting, which I find is probably the most interesting, is not only are we reflecting on the person that has died, we can look at their family and say, how is this really going to impact them? This is going to be really significant in their lives. And that naturally turns us inward and we also go, I know my life is short, and I want to make the most significant portion that I can. And so it turns us inward and reflect on our own lives and our own mortality. So, and in celebrating for a funeral is not throwing a party. It's the fellowship that you get when you start connecting with people. So when these needs really begin to be met, and we have our emotional, relational, spiritual, which is kind of that outer circle, those are some things that are just innate in us, and we want to have those emotional, relational, spiritual needs met. And so we do that by those 7 components that are inside that circle. So it really gives your family a chance to, as well as a forum, to ultimately begin the healing journey. And that's truly our purpose as a funeral home. So I use journey all the time because I know that a journey might be a straight path, but it might be a windy path up and down a hill with lots of rocks and things to go over. So I know when we talk about journey, it's a process. But we want to make sure that everyone has the best chance to begin healing, so every family can be so different. So what does that look like for your family? I guess that's kind of brings us back to, what is that gathering, what does that type of event look like for your family? Would it be at a church, or would it be a funeral home? Would it be a private ceremony at a park or at your home? Or will it be something just really simple? Or will it be something that is got a lot of detail to it? I will tell you that some type of gathering will happen. Sometimes most of it is controlled, and sometimes it's going to be organic. Organic means that, let's just use myself, for example. If, say, my wife passed away, or maybe she was sick for a long time, and a lot of people knew she was ill, I didn't have a service, but I went to the grocery store after she passed away, and somebody would ask, how is your wife doing? And I would have to have that moment, that unexpected moment, where I would have to say, well, she passed away about 2 weeks ago. Oh, when was the service? Well, I didn't have one. So it's kind of like you can either have a controlled moment or it will happen. So I will just say that I've seen that in cases of several families that have walked through that. Sometimes a type of service will be family tradition. We've always done it this way. So, or it might be, there might be some faith beliefs that are behind that. So sometimes it's staying within budget. So those are some things that we always have to consider. So when it comes to the financial side of funerals, how do we take care of that part so families are not caught flat-footed when it comes to what funerals cost these days? So we have what's called key points to a funeral policy. So one of the key points is it is readily available for families. So it makes it easier for families not only to have some guidance when you pre-plan, but also if you have the financial part taken care of, money can be readily available. Because we found that most funeral homes, and ours is one of them, but payment is due actually at the time when services are provided. And so when we sit down with families, we have an estimate that we come to, and we request that payment be due when we sit down to make those plans. So we found that, and there's ways to do that. You can always do cash, check. You can always, what we found too with cash and check is interesting though, is if you're a power of attorney, the authority of that power of attorney ceases at death. So a lot of people don't realize that they think that they can still write checks. And I've seen that where families have written checks because they were power of attorney, and they've had to collect those checks back again and rewrite them 30 or 60 days later once they got the clearance to be able to write those checks. So it's a very tedious process if you don't have those funds set aside. So in the case of my father-in-law's funeral, most of his assets were all, he was milking most of his assets, so he was tied up in machinery and livestock. And so because she wasn't ready for that, we all pitched in and we all paid for the funeral. We were paid back, but it was a process. Because unfortunately, the funeral home did not take cows or chickens to pay for the funeral, so we helped with that. So we also found that 401ks, if people have retirement or life insurance that's already existing, we found that there's lengthy delays and a lot of paperwork that go through with that. So that doesn't help in that process either. We found that really the best thing is to have a pre-funded policy. So basically sitting down, figuring out what that cost of services would be, and then you can set funds aside for that. So those funds would be protected. So a care center doesn't have access to that. The state doesn't have access to it. Medicare, it is your money strictly set aside in what's called an irrevocable funeral account, and that's set aside strictly for that expense. So there's no delays. We're able to access those funds immediately. So, and it is transferable. So for example, if you live in Cottage Grove, you weren't born here, but you wanted to have your services, but you're intending to have a service, but maybe kids moved up to Duluth and you want to relocate there, we can help transfer that. That's a transferable fund that we can help with too. So,
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that a trust?
I will have Lara answer that question. I don't know.
No.
Is it a trust?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's
Yes.
irrevocable?
Yeah.
It's irrevocable funeral trust. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I thought maybe it was insurance, because here it says the funds are protected by an insurance provider.
Yep.
But on your website, it says you're not able to guarantee your insurance policies. So I was kind of
Do you
confused.
know what that means?
So the vehicle that they do offer insurance payments into these irrevocable funeral trusts, so it is different than private insurance. So both are right, because it is a trust, but they do offer insurance payments if you want to do it that way. A lot of people use it as a savings account where they earmark money and it sits in there, but they also have other ways of putting it in there. So, and sometimes there's 1035 exchanges. You can take your private insurance and actually put it into that trust too. So that's why there's many layers to it. There's many ways of getting it there.
Sounds like it. Who's the trustee?
It is actually the primary beneficiary is to any funeral home in which its interest may appear, and the secondary beneficiary is to your estate. So that's why it's available the day you die. It can be used for any of your funeral costs. And people going on spend downs or Medicaid, that's where they'll have you liquidate your private insurance. This cannot be liquidated because it's for this purpose. So yeah, that's all the things I talked to you about. He does the big people or big groups.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm glad. She speaks the language. I mostly work with families at the time of need, so she's got the lingo down. So, but yes, they are transferable. And but like we talked about, they are protected. You can always set up payment plans as well. So it doesn't have to be all one fully funded. It can be a series of payments over the course of time. And the other thing too is that there is protection during that time. So for example, if you had no pre-existing health conditions and maybe you set up for a 5-year payment, at year 3, death occurs, you're covered for that full amount that you've been funded for. So Laura can go through that in more detail, and it does grow over time. So it's a small percentage of growth over time. So, and there's also something called the away from home protection. So if you travel outside of a 75-mile radius of your home, if you have this policy, they will fund getting you back to your primary residence. So whether you go on a cruise or whether you just travel regularly outside of that 75-mile radius, they'll bring you back here. Preparation of the body can happen there, and they bring you back, and we can have our service, cremation, any of that. So it's like a $490 payment, and it's good for life. So you can take it out on yourself, on your kids, your neighbor. So if you're friends with your neighbor, obviously. But anyway, that's something that more is an option as we go forward. So the whole goal, like I had mentioned earlier, is to really educate and prepare, and just really have everything in place for your family so that there's no surprises for them on that day. And over the course of 28 years of being a funeral director, and just estimating, I've probably met with about 2,000 families in planning their services. I've never had one family that have said, "Oh, I wish they wouldn't have planned anything." They're just so grateful to have some type of framework. And so, and there's such a difference between a family that has some framework and a family that's starting at ground zero, because they at least have some type of direction that they're headed. We know that the bill will come due someday, but being prepared is a key. So I encourage you to just take any opportunity to gather as much information to move forward. And I'm going to have Laura come up to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what a typical meeting with her would look like. And then we're going to have food. And then I will be available for Q&A. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer. So.
Can you tell he loves funeral service and jokes? That's always what he brings. Yeah, my name is Laura, and I'm a funeral director as well, but I do pre-need, just meeting with families ahead of time. So this is kind of your first step, I would say, into gathering some information, but the next step would be to sit down. Some people are intimidated about coming in, that I'm going to pressure you into something. That is not my personality at all. I believe in everything we do here. I just want you to know all your options. When he's talking about cremation, we have about 7 different packages available through the funeral home. A lot of families sit down and have no idea that these are, all the things that we offer. And I always say it's nice to do it when you're in your right mind and things are going well. Making decisions when you're in the heat of the moment, obviously they get done, but you're more pressed and don't have time to think it through. So not even just talking about traditional cremation, we have a lot of cemetery information I can give you. If you're a veteran, there's a lot of things people don't realize that are available. We like to have your DD 214 on file if you're a veteran. It makes it a lot smoother at the time for honors and any of the benefits you could receive. And then even cremation, you can sign your cremation authorization. So it's just black and white, easy for your family at the time. So I'm the one who sits down with you. If you want to make an appointment, we actually have a sheet we're going to have you fill out. We can come around the room with a little calendar and get it set up. It's usually about an hour to an hour and a half to just go through. And sometimes I meet with people 2 to 3 times. We're just going through our options, coming back, going through our options. You can get it to the point you're comfortable with it. And on the financial side, there's a lot of layers to it. And we, as funeral directors, the financial side is hard. I mean, we're looking at families sometimes that are blindsided by this. We just want to make it as smooth as it can be for your family. And yes, my mom was in that situation. I always say when my dad was dying, we weren't thinking about what's next, and we're funeral directors. We didn't think one bit. All we cared about was getting him healthy, getting him care that he needed. Literally, next to his deathbed when he died, I was like, oh my word, we're one of those families. We have not had one conversation. Because anytime, we would talk about it in front of him, he, oh, I'm going to go to the barn. I don't need to talk about this. And he was young, he was in his late 50s. So anything can happen to any of us, and we're, not doom and gloom by any means. But, the reason that you come in and do this is obviously for your family. So I commend you for coming. We try to make it as lighthearted as it can be, but if you would like to meet with me, I meet in homes or at the funeral home, and most of it is just about educating and getting things ready. So there's a sheet on your table, the one that has the information where you can fill out about what you're interested in. You don't have to do, if you're a couple, you can fill out one, don't feel like you have to do two. But Grace and I are going to come around the room and collect those. If you'd like to set an appointment, it's a little easier than me calling or you trying to call back. So we will do that. And then we also have a drawing. Miss Vanna is here again. We have a couple Hy-Vee cards to lighten things too. So it's a $15 gift card. And you have
Are you
an...
going to draw?
Oh.
Do you want me to draw?
I'll draw.
David?
David.
Yeah,
and we don't know how to say your last name. How do you say it? Chilton. Okay.
All right.
That should get you a tank of gas. Or I mean a gallon of gas. Not a tank.
And then Peggy.
Peggy.
All right.
Right.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Thanks for coming.
So after you fill out that form, we do have food outside in our entryway. Because it's a smaller group, we set up, this is our chapel. We usually have, this room is full of chairs. And actually, if you guys could open that side door, we do have a community room that we serve families. So since you're here, if you haven't seen it, we'll open the doors. But we're going to serve you out there. It's a buffet of sandwiches and some veggies and fruit from Patax actually today. So you're welcome to grab your food and come back here and eat and take your time. And then once you're done filling those out, Mike will come around if anybody has questions.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.